The Wade Wilson case, often referred to as the Strangled Women Murder Trial, involves a series of heinous crimes that have captivated both the public and the media. The story begins on the evening of October 6, 2019, when Christine Melton went out with friends to a club in Cape Coral, Florida. It was a typical night of fun and socializing, but it took a tragic turn when Christine met Wade Wilson, a troubled man with a criminal past. As the night progressed, Christine and Wade struck up a conversation. Despite not knowing much about him, she decided to leave the club with him. They headed to her apartment, and it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. The following day, Christine's lifeless body was discovered, sparking a swift and intense investigation. In a disturbing twist, the very next day, another woman, Diane Ruiz, was walking down the street when a stranger approached her, seemingly in need of directions. As she began to help him, the stranger suddenly attacked and killed her. Wade Wilson, a resident of Cape Coral, Florida, led a life overshadowed by a series of personal and legal troubles that painted a grim picture of his character. His past, marked by a pattern of criminal activities and significant psychological issues, laid the groundwork for the violent actions that would later shock the community. From a young age, Wilson exhibited signs of psychological distress. Growing up in a tumultuous environment, he struggled with behavioral problems that often placed him at odds with authority figures. His early interactions with mental health professionals suggested deep-seated issues, including possible personality disorders. These untreated or inadequately managed psychological problems likely contributed to his erratic behavior and eventual criminal activities. Wilson's criminal record began to take shape in his late teens and early 20s. He was involved in various offenses, ranging from petty theft to more serious crimes. These early brushes with the law set a pattern for his future, as he frequently found himself on the wrong side of legal and societal norms. One of the most alarming aspects of Wilson's criminal history was his pattern of domestic violence. He had several reported incidents where he physically and emotionally abused his partners. These cases were often characterized by extreme aggression and control, revealing his inability to maintain healthy relationships. Reports from his ex-girlfriends painted a picture of a man who was both charming and dangerously volatile, capable of sudden and severe outbursts. Wilson's substance abuse problems exacerbated his volatile nature. He frequently used drugs and alcohol to cope with his psychological issues, which only heightened his aggressive tendencies. His addiction issues often led to further criminal behavior as he sought ways to fund his habits, leading to arrests for drug possession and related crimes. October 7, 2019. Christine Melton reported. Missing Christine Melton was a 35-year-old resident of Cape Coral, Florida. On October 7, 2019, her family reported her missing after she failed to maintain contact, which was unusual behavior for her. Christine was last seen at her home. Her sudden disappearance raised immediate concerns among her family and friends, prompting them to contact law enforcement. Christine was known to be a responsible and caring individual, making her unexplained absence all the more alarming. The police quickly initiated a missing persons investigation, interviewing friends, family, and neighbors to gather any information that could lead to her whereabouts. Wilson, the last known person to have seen her, became a person of interest in the case almost immediately. October 8, 2019, Diane Ruiz reported missing. The following day, another woman, Diane Ruiz, aged 43, was reported missing. Diane, like Christine, was a resident of Cape Coral. She was last seen alive near her residence, and her failure to show up for work without any prior notice was unusual. Friends and co-workers became worried and reported her missing to the authorities. Diane's disappearance came on the heels of Christine's, heightening the sense of urgency among the police and the community. Both women were well known in their circles, and the back-to-back reports of their disappearances led to increased media attention and public concern. October 11, 2019. Discovery of Christine Melton's body. 3 days after Diane Ruiz was reported missing, a grim discovery was made. On October 11, 2019, Christine Melton's body was found inside her home. She had been brutally strangled to death. The discovery of her body turned the missing persons case into a homicide investigation. The manner of her death indicated a violent struggle, suggesting that she had been overpowered and killed in a personal, hands-on attack. The condition of the crime scene provided crucial forensic evidence. Investigators collected DNA samples, fingerprints, and other physical evidence that could link the perpetrator to the crime. The discovery of Christine's body also intensified the search for Diane Ruiz, as there was now a strong fear that she might have met a similar fate. October 13, 2019. Discovery of Diane Ruiz's body. 2 days later, on October 13, 2019, the search for Diane Ruiz ended tragically. Diane's body was discovered in a wooded area not far from her home. Like Christine, Diane had been strangled to death. The similarities in the method of killing and the proximity of their disappearances strongly suggested that the same individual was responsible for both murders. The discovery of Diane's body confirmed the worst fears of the community and law enforcement. It also provided additional forensic evidence that would be critical in building a case against the suspect. DNA evidence found on Diane's body and at the crime scene matched the samples collected from Christine's home, providing a direct link between the two murders. Wade Wilson quickly became the prime suspect due to his connections to both victims and his documented history of violent behavior. Christine Melton was a server at a Cape Coral bar where she met Wilson the night before her murder. They spent the evening together with friends and eventually went to her apartment. Wilson admitted to his father that he strangled Melton while she was sleeping and then rolled her body up in a carpet. He left Melton's apartment in her car. The police found Melton's body in her apartment later that day after her friends and family couldn't reach her. Diane Ruiz did not have a prior personal relationship with Wilson. She was a bartender and a mother of two, and her murder appeared to be more opportunistic. According to Wilson's confession, he picked up Ruiz, asked for directions, and then strangled her before running her over with a car multiple times. Ruiz's body was discovered in an empty lot on October 7, 2019. Wilson's interactions with these women were primarily driven by his violent tendencies rather than any deep personal connections. Wilson's behavior following the murders was erratic and frantic. Witnesses reported seeing him covered in blood, missing teeth, and behaving manically. His friend Josh Lukic, a business owner, testified that Wilson came to his business asking for a way to leave town, confessing that he had killed someone. Lukic called 911, which led to Wilson's capture. The DNA evidence collected from the crime scenes linked Wilson to both murders. The presence of his DNA on the bodies of the victims and at the crime scenes was a critical piece of evidence. Also, the security cameras captured Wilson's movements around the time of the murders, placing him near the victims' residences shortly before their disappearances. Upon arrest, Wilson initially confessed to the murders, providing details that only the perpetrator could know. However, he later retracted his confession, claiming he was coerced into making it because of threats to his family. Despite his retraction, the evidence against Wilson was overwhelming. The pretrial proceedings in the Wade Wilson case were marked by a series of motions and hearings. Wilson's defense team attempted to suppress some of the evidence, arguing that it was obtained unlawfully. However, the judge ruled that the evidence was admissible, allowing the prosecution to present a robust case against Wilson. The trial of Wade Wilson began with heavy media coverage and public interest due to the brutality of the crimes. During the trial, the prosecution presented a compelling case against Wilson. They detailed his interactions with Melton and Ruiz, the forensic evidence linking him to both crime scenes, and his own erratic behavior following the murders. Witnesses, including friends of Melton and random civilians who encountered Wilson after the murders, testified about his suspicious and frantic demeanor. The prosecution also highlighted Wilson's initial confession, despite his claims of coercion later on. The defense attempted to argue that Wilson's confession was made under duress and that he was framed as part of a larger conspiracy involving a crime ring in Lee County. Wilson alleged that he was involved with a criminal organization that had framed him for the murders. However, these claims were largely seen as attempts to deflect blame and discredit the witnesses testifying against him. Wilson's defense team argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there were alternative explanations for the DNA evidence. They suggested that Wilson had been framed and that other individuals could have committed the murders. However, their arguments failed to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. After a trial that lasted several weeks, the jury found Wade Wilson guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. During the penalty phase, the jury recommended the death penalty and the judge concurred, sentencing Wilson to death. Wade Wilson's psychological profile played a significant role in the trial. Experts described him as chronically and severely mentally ill, with a history of violent outbursts and substance abuse. His relationships with the victims were characterized by control and manipulation, fitting the profile of a predator who sought to dominate and ultimately destroy his partners. Even after his conviction, Wilson continued to claim he was framed as part of a larger conspiracy. He alleged involvement with a crime ring and insisted that he was a scapegoat. These claims, however, were largely dismissed by law enforcement and the courts due to the lack of credible evidence supporting them. Wilson's allegations were seen as attempts to create doubt and deflect responsibility. The families of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz expressed relief at the verdict and sentence. While no punishment could fully compensate for their loss, they felt that justice had been served, and Wilson's life sentence provided some measure of closure. Memorials and vigils were held in honor of Melton and Ruiz, highlighting the community's solidarity and support for the victims' families. The media coverage of Wade Wilson's trial was comprehensive, with news outlets such as Court TV and Wink News providing detailed reports on the proceedings and the reactions. During the trial, Wilson's demeanor was noted as particularly unemotional, which many found unsettling. His lack of visible remorse or reaction during critical moments, such as the reading of the verdict, was widely reported and commented upon. Court TV provided extensive daily updates on the trial, including the emotional testimonies from the victims' families during the penalty phase. The family members' impact statements were poignant and highlighted the deep pain and loss they experienced. This coverage helped humanize the victims and underscored the gravity of Wilson's crimes. The public reaction was one of shock and outrage, especially given the brutal nature of the crimes and Wilson's apparent lack of remorse. In the local community of Cape Coral, where both victims were well known, the murders left a lasting scar. Vigils and community meetings were held to honor the memories of Melton and Ruiz and to provide support for their grieving families. Wilson's ex-girlfriend's testimony also played a significant role in shaping public perception. She described him as a psychopath and revealed that she had tried to warn others about his dangerous behavior. This testimony added to the narrative of Wilson as a deeply troubled individual with a history of violence and instability. The conviction and sentencing of Wade Wilson had several implications. The verdict provided a sense of closure for the families of the victims who had endured a traumatic and prolonged ordeal. Also, The case set legal precedents in terms of the use of forensic evidence and the handling of mentally ill defendants in capital cases, and the case raised public awareness about domestic violence and the importance of early intervention in abusive relationships.